The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. Today is Friday the 13th of all days to have the calm before the storm, so to speak, for this coronavirus pandemic. It had to be a Friday the 13th. I didn't even realize this was coming. I'm not superstitious, but I just think it's worth noting. Welcome to the show. That first 5 seconds was completely useless. Just throw it away. Thanks so much for joining me. It's going to be a jam-packed show. I have a lot to cover, a lot of content to cover. A lot has happened since yesterday. A lot of new information, a lot of new resources. There's politics, and this coronavirus is one of the most political events to happen in our nation, on our planet, the face of our planet, in some time. So we have to discuss it. I want to make sure that you have the most up-to-date information. And I want to start off, before I do anything else, by saying, if you have the privilege and the luxury of being able to stay home, then you absolutely should take it. Not everybody can stay home. I understand. I know not everyone is, not everyone has a job that allows them to work from home. And to that end, not a lot of people are ready to make that leap that I was talking about yesterday, where we're willing to say, F these bills, F these, these credit cards, these, our landlords, bump all of it, because our health is more, our lives are more important than any of this. And I also based that suggestion, that leap of faith, so to speak, based on the fact that the things that this government is going to have to do simply to survive will include suspending, placing a moratorium on evictions, placing a moratorium on repossessions of your vehicles, placing a moratorium on foreclosures for people who own their homes, placing a moratorium on any type of utility disconnect. And this is what I've been saying since Tuesday or Wednesday. I started saying this. I tweeted it out yesterday morning, and shortly after, AOC, who, I guess this is a humble brag, but she follows me, and almost immediately after I tweeted it out, she sent out something similar. And then the Sanders campaign picked it up, and they started calling for it. And now we see all over the country, this is starting to happen. Here in Atlanta, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms has called for all water utilities to all water bills to be placed in stasis. The easiest way for me to have said that would be like she's called for a moratorium on any disconnects of your water bill. That's what I was trying to say, and I kind of got lost in the sentence, but I digress. The point is that this is spreading. Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts, he is now calling for the same thing. All across the country, people are calling for a moratorium on bills. And the reason we're calling for a moratorium on bills is because you need to be able to go home and stay there for an extended amount of time. Now, the real question is how you're going to keep your sanity in the midst of being isolated in your home. We'll figure that out. There's the internet. Okay, we'll work that out. But the first things first is you need to be able to stay home. So today, if you have any option, let's start with the easy stuff. Let's start with the low hanging fruit. Don't go to the club tonight. Don't go to the happy hour. To the happy hour. Don't go to happy hour. Don't go to the convention. Don't go to these extra meetings. I love the Lord, but don't go to church. Stay home. Because the fewer people, if just 100 people fewer get sick in a city, that is going to make so much difference for that local hospital. So some people can't stay home. They don't have the luxury. They don't have the option. But if you do, you need to seize upon it. Why? Because if you don't get sick, that means there's an extra bed at the hospital for the person who wasn't as lucky as you, who had to go to work. There'll be a hospital bed for them. And a lot of the challenge isn't so much, let's put it like this. The reason the death rate is as high as it is, and we'll go over some of that data in a minute. The reason the mortality rate is as high as it is because most systems It's not just the United States, but across the globe. We don't create hospitals sufficient enough to cover every sick person in our country at the same time. Right? It's like a hotel. Once it's booked, it's booked. Once a hospital is full, it's full. I mean, and when I say full, I mean, they have people in the hallways. They have people in the cafeterias. I mean, they have people everywhere. They have people in the freaking basement. Like when a hospital is full, there's nothing that they can do. They set up triage, but then they start doing what they're doing in Italy, which is prioritizing patients. They're going to treat those that they can save, and those who look like they're going to die, they just let them die. So you staying home literally is a matter of life and death for someone else who's not as lucky as you, who has to leave the house. And they're likely going to they're likely going to get sick. And if there's not a hospital bed for them, then there's a higher possibility that they're going to die. Yesterday, we went over this data. I want to go over it again. We're expecting close to 150 million infections. That's half of this country. We are looking at a mortality rate of anywhere between 1% to 5%. I hope that we are all wrong. Before I even finish this next sentence, I hope on everything that this is overblown, that we can look back and be like, ha, 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 remember how scary everybody was scared. They bought up all the toilet tissue. There was no toilet tissue. What the hell were people going to do with toilet tissue? Yeah, I really hope that we can look back and laugh at this. But if this is as bad as doctors and experts are saying, a 1% mortality rate is going to put us at 1.5 million people who are going to die from this. And I do have to say this again before I get to all the media. I have a ton of media. I'm not going to be able to finish this show in the first 30 or 45 minutes. I probably would do a 45-minute public show and then another 45 minutes in the patrons episode. But before we do any of that, I have to say this. If you have a platform and you are downplaying the potential severity of this, shame on you, right? This is the public show, so I can't really say what I want to say, but I hope that there's a seat reserved in hell for you, because it is always proper to err on the side of caution when people listen to you. When you have, like, I've seen so many artists and popular people on Instagram put out bad information. And I'm like, if I'm wrong, then you get to just call me an alarmist. If you're wrong, then people in your audience are going to die. Okay. So I think it is the responsible thing to do with people, anybody with a platform of any size. I don't care if 50 people listen to you or about 10,000 that listen to me every day. Hey, we're coming up. I remember we only had 2 listeners. Hey. I will inject absurdity, silliness, and just regular stupid stuff that Ben does throughout this conversation because it is entirely too deep, right? But we are at 10,000, about 10,000 listens, about 7,000 downloads every day, and about 2,000 to 3,000 listens on YouTube at any given point. But anyway, I digress. That's not the point. The point is this: whether your audience is the size of 50 people, 10,000 people, or 10 million people, you have a responsibility to help people see and take the necessary precautions. And if it turns out that we're wrong, then in a couple of weeks, we'll all just go back to the mall and act like nothing happened. And you can look at us and say, oh, y'all were fear mongering. Yes. Okay. I will rather accept that than the possibility of me telling you that this is no worse than the flu. And then you going out and getting this and then you die. Okay. I'm going to err on the side of caution. Lots of media. Here's the first clip.
Need also, in this economic crisis, to place an immediate moratorium on evictions, on foreclosures, and on utility shutoffs, so that no one loses their home during this crisis, and that everyone has access to clean water, electricity, heat, and air conditioning.
Yep. This is literally what I tweeted out yesterday. Great minds think alike. Either that or they follow me on Twitter and they got the idea from me. Either way, it doesn't matter. What matters is this is what has to happen. That was Bernie Sanders calling for a moratorium on evictions, on foreclosures. What I added in there is repossessions. We don't need anybody coming to pick up anybody's car. And we need to make sure that there are no utility cutoffs. None, from the internet to gas, to water, to lights, to electric, whatever. And so Sanders is the only one on the national level, only presidential candidate, the three people involved in the presidential race between Sanders, Biden, and Trump. Sanders is the only one with the plan that I like to think that I had some influence on. I'm kind of proud of that, quite honestly. But this is what has to happen. I think people are missing the fact that this is not even a question of if we do this. It's a matter of how long before we realize that if we don't do this, we are going into one of the most severe depressions that we've seen in American history that would rival, that could surpass the Great Depression. Have you seen yesterday they infused $500 billion into the markets. And that this is from the Fed. Now they're going to commit a total of 1.5 trillion to try to shore up the markets. Now, after the patron party, we're going to eviscerate this in terms of the hypocrisy and questioning where we're going to get that kind of money from, because we're literally about $1.7 trillion in student debt. And everyone always asks, well, how are we going to get the money? We'll talk about that aspect of it in a second. But I want to show you something. If you look at the graphs from yesterday, from the point they infused $500 billion, it ticked up. The market started to recover slightly, but then it dropped precipitously again. So what I'm saying is, if $500 billion was absorbed by the decline in the markets, they're going to try another $500 billion and it could still be declining. We're going off the economic cliff. We're going into a great recession, and it can only get worse because people are not going to be able to actively participate in the system. Does everybody follow me? Because you are going to have to eventually, whether you have the choice and the luxury and the privilege or not of staying home, you're going to have to stay home, right? That's coming up inevitably. And so for everyone, whether you can work from home or not, everyone still needs to have an income coming in, which requires a universal basic income. Everyone is going to need to be able to live in their house without fear of eviction or foreclosure, which means a moratorium. Everyone is going to need to have access to their vehicles when the time comes for them to restock on their supplies or go to another city or go back to work. No one should lose their vehicles. Moratorium on repossessions. No one should be without water, lights, electricity, or internet, because how else are we going to do anything? And if we don't have income coming in, we can't do any of those things. And even if we have universal basic income, it's not going to be enough to cover all those things. Universal basic income is generally just enough for consumption, right? For people to buy food, for people to buy some entertainment so that the entertainment industry doesn't completely collapse. So people can purchase things on Amazon so all of that doesn't completely collapse, which probably will collapse anyway, because who's going to be delivering it, right? I'm sorry, I just had to have that. I had to have that thought process out loud. But the point is, there has to be a universal basic income. There has to be a moratorium on bills. That's the only way our economy is going to survive this. If you're worried about our economy surviving this. And quite frankly, we should be worried about our economy surviving this, because that gives us the greatest potential for the most disruption of our system, from which we may not be able to recover. It is depressing and sad that a lot of people are going to die, but we have to take the necessary precautions to protect ourselves, our health, and some sense of economy.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
Here we go. I feel like it is all the more necessary for us to break up every episode and include the patron party, no matter how many patrons we get or don't get. But very special welcome to Finn. Thank you. Let Poe know I said hello. Johnny Von Neumann Halchuk, thank you so much for becoming a patron. Gumi HD, thank you for becoming a patron. Fan of Fruit, thank you for becoming a patron. Harry Volsey, thank you for becoming a patron. Sacktown, Chris from Sacktown, thank you for becoming a patron. Jen Bush, thank you for becoming a patron. All right. Welcome back, everybody. For those of you who listen on YouTube, and you're like, Ben, I never hear your ads here. That's because they're bastards, man. YouTube still, it doesn't matter what we discuss on this show. I could be talking about berries and fruit, and they're going to demonetize my videos. So yeah, if you want to support the show, listen to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, whatever, all those other places. But I digress. Let's listen to a little bit more media. Here's audio of Representative Katie Porter as she begins to explain. She takes on this director. She takes him head on and explains to him that something that he should know, that he has the power to use the authority of law to make sure that every person in this country, regardless of insurance status, whether they're covered or not, can get tested for COVID-19. She sent this letter to him a week prior, and he acted as though he didn't know what she was talking about. Here's that clip.
Dr. Redfield, will you commit to the CDC right now using that existing authority to pay for diagnostic testing free to every American, regardless of insurance?
Well, I can say that we're going to do everything to make sure everybody can get the care they need.
Reclaiming my time. Dr. Redfield, you have the existing authority. Will you commit right now to using the authority that you have vested in you under law that provides in a public health emergency for testing, treatment, exam, isolation without cost, yes or no?
What I'm going to say is I'm going to review it in detail with CDC and the department.
Reclaiming my time. Dr. Redfield, respectfully, I wrote you this letter along with my colleagues, Rosa DeLaura and Lauren Underwood, Congressman Underwood and Congressman DeLaura. We wrote you this letter 1 week ago. We quoted that existing authority to you, and we laid out this problem. We asked for a response yesterday. The deadline and the time for delay has passed. Will you commit to invoking your existing authority under 42 CFR 71.30 to provide for coronavirus testing for every American, regardless of insurance coverage?
What I was trying to say is that CDC is working with HHS now to see how we operationalize that. Our intent is to make sure every American gets the care and treatment they need at this time of this major epidemic, and I'm currently working with HHS to see how to best operationalize it.
Dr. Redfield, you don't need to do any work to operationalize. You need to make a commitment to the American people so they come in to get tested. You can operationalize the payment structure tomorrow.
I think you're an excellent questioner, so my answer is yes.
Excellent. Everybody in America hear that. You are eligible to go get tested for coronavirus and have that covered regardless of insurance.
Now, I just want to point out a couple of things here. One, I absolutely love what she did. Right. Brilliant. But two, it's too late. It's too late, folks. It's too late to try to get tested. Most facilities aren't going to test you at this point because they all accept the fact, and I'm accepting it at this point, that we're beyond containment. Only thing that we could do is slow the spread. Now, there are some places where you could, honestly, I was reading, I forgot which article, I've been reading so much that I forgot which one this is, but they said, don't go to a hospital facility to try to get tested, right? At this point, the hospital facilities are so overrun that they can only help people who are in severe danger. And in, like I said, in Italy, even those who are in severe danger, if they're older, doctors are not going to treat them because they don't have enough supplies to treat everybody. So while what Katie Porter did was brilliant and necessary, it's like 3 weeks too late. And it's I don't know if it's any fault of hers. I think it's just a fault of our government in general for not bringing attention to something until it was already too late. We are beyond containment. The only thing that we could do at this point is stop the spread or slow the spread. I'm sorry, stopping the spread would be containment. We can't do that. We can slow the spread, which means stay your ass home to slow the spread. And this is critical. So the University of California, San Francisco had a biohub panel on COVID-19. It took place yesterday, or at least they published the notes from this on yesterday. And here are some of the key takeaways. Number one, they say at this point, we are past containment. Containment is basically futile. Our containment efforts won't reduce the number of who get infected in the United States. Number two, now we're just trying to slow the spread to help healthcare providers deal with the demand peak. In other words, the goal of containment is to flatten the curve, to lower the peak of the surge of demand that will hit the healthcare providers, and to buy time in hopes a drug can be developed. Number three, how many in the community already have the virus? No one knows. We are moving from containment to care. They went on to say that we in the U.S. are currently where Italy was a week ago. We see nothing to say that we will be substantially different. Here it is. 40 to 70% of the U.S. population will be infected over the next 12 to 18 months. After that level, you can start to get herd immunity. Unlike flu, this is entirely novel to humans, so there is no latent immunity in the global population. I kind of went past the most important part. 40 to 70% of the U.S. population will be infected over the next 12 to 18 months. They went on to say, we use their numbers to work out a guesstimate of deaths, indicating about 1.5 million Americans may die. The panelists did not disagree with our estimate. This compares to a seasonal flu average of 50,000 Americans per year. Assume 50% of the U.S. population, that's 160 million people infected, with 1% mortality rate, that's 1.6 million Americans who die over the next 12 to 18 months. The fatality rate is in the range of 10 times the flu. This assumes no drug is found effective and made available. Okay, here a little bit more. The death rate varies hugely by age. Over 80, the mortality rate could be 10 to 15%. So again, like right now it's trending on Twitter, boomer remover. And that was coined by some kids in middle school who said it to their teacher. Their teacher tweeted it and it started trending. This is more than a boomer remover. This is bad, folks. And what we can do to stop this what we could do to help is really to stay home. I know you have to pay those bills, but folks, this is an inflection point in American history. Are we going to be slaves to our bills so much so that we die? Or are we going to be brave enough to step away and say, fuck those bills. I've got to take care of me and my family. And if it doesn't save anybody else but you and your family, isn't that enough? See, a lot of people are pushing back on me when I tell them to stay home. I've got a lot of, I got quite a few, not a lot, but quite a few people who are like, well, that's a privilege. I got black folks got to pay I know. I've been poor most of my life. I know exactly what it is to scramble to try to get that next check. Okay. But what I'm saying is, with a mortality rate of 1%, and we're looking at 40 to 70% of the population being affected, that's 160 million people potentially. That's 1.6 million people who are going to potentially die. I'm sorry. I don't give a about my bills. Let them come take my cars if they want to. I'll sneeze on them and make them think they got the coronavirus. All those I'm saying, I'm serious. No, I'm not really serious, but I'm just saying, all I'm saying is we have to prioritize our health. We have to prioritize our lives over capitalism, over these bills. These bills, man. All right. I want to play some audio from a conference call that was held by the National Nurses United Union. They put out some really good information that I think you should hear. A couple of voices that you're going to hear is going to be Bonnie Castillo. She's the executive director. The voice that you're going to hear right now, I'm almost certain it is Kathy Kennedy. She is the VP of NNU, and she's going to be discussing something called the precautionary principle. But I have a couple of clips. I want you to listen to them all because it's very informative, and it's just good to hear it from other sources than my own voice.
The virus that caused COVID-19 emerged in China in late 2019. It appears it was most likely circulating for several weeks before clinicians picked it up and was identified as a novel coronavirus, now called SARS-CoV-2. There's still a lot we don't know about it, and there are currently no specific treatments available and no vaccines. Experts expect it will take at least a year. So, we have to use the precautionary principle to guide our decisions in this kind of situation. What is the precautionary principle, you ask? It means we don't wait for scientific proof before action is taken to protect people's health. We need to start with the highest level of protection. We can always take layers off as we go, but we cannot go backwards. What are the symptoms and clinical outcomes of COVID-19? Fever, symptoms of respiratory illness such as cough or shortness of breath. Other symptoms can include fatigue, headache, and diarrhea. Or symptoms can show up differently for different people. And they can progress to cause viral pneumonia.
Okay. I have more, but I just want to stop there before she goes into the severity of the disease. And I want to point out what she's discussing in terms of the principle, the precautionary principle. Goodness. The precautionary principle is just fundamentally this idea: if there's a possibility, if it's a reasonable and plausible possible outcome, that we should prepare for it. It means, and I discussed this in the patrons episode, I didn't realize that there was an actual principle around it, but basically it says if there's a reasonable possibility that something's going to happen, we have the responsibility of preparing for it. This doesn't mean that if there's a possibility of flying rodents attacking through space, I think I saw in one YouTube video, that we spend our entire GDP on trying to prepare to take out those rodents, right? No, it's something that's possible and plausible, whether we have concrete scientific evidence for it or not. Another example would be climate change, right? We have a consensus. We have consensus from the scientific community that this is a plausible path that we're on and that we need to prepare for it. But what we do instead in this country, around this world, is that we put off things until it's too late. We literally could have prepared a vaccine for the coronavirus. How effective it would have been, I don't know. Some people say it could be, the efficacy of it could be as low as 50%. But when you're talking about 1.5 million people dying, 1.6 million people dying, 50% is pretty damn good. But we're not operating underneath the precautionary principle. We are letting things creep up on us. We could have had a vaccination already prepared for this, and we need to change that paradigm. But let's keep listening into these nurses from Nurses United.
How severe is COVID-19? The Chinese Centers for Disease Control, CDC, has the most data. They report that 20% of cases can be classified as severe or critical. In Italy, recently reported that 10% of the cases required hospitalization. The Chinese CDC reported a 2.3% mortality, but if you do the math from the World Health Organization, reports of deaths versus confirmed case is at 3.4%.
3.4%. Now, listen, I know my disclaimer that I'm getting ready to give here is not really going to be meaningful considering what I'm getting ready to tell you. My disclaimer is that I am not trying to make you fearful. I'm not trying to increase your anxiety. I am not trying to make you panic at all. What I'm trying to do is convince you to just stay home. Just stay home this weekend. Today. Don't go anywhere else. If you go anywhere, don't get out of your car. Just like, I don't know if you need to, where you need to drive to. Like, I had to go to the other side of Atlanta on Tuesday, and I got out of my car once. That was it. I got out of my car, took the risk, but other than that, I stayed my ass in the car and I went home. That's what I'm trying to convince you of. I'm not trying to make you panic. But if you think about this being a mortality rate of 3.4%, if 160 million Americans are infected with this because we're past the point of containment, all we could do is slow down the spread. That's potentially 5.4 million people who would die over the next 12 to 18 months from this virus. We've never seen anything like this in our country. It is the perfect combination of fecklessness from our government It is a perfect combination of the fact that we don't have safety nets. We have no way of just telling everyone to just stay home because everybody's panicked. Like, how are we going to pay our bills? Because that's the system that we've designed. We've designed a system to have everyone constantly on edge, worried about how to pay their bills, such that when a pandemic comes around that could be halted or slowed by us going home and just staying home, everyone is so focused on paying their bills. And I'm not saying that to insult you who are worried about it. I'm saying that we should be pissed at this fucking system. This system and this president is going to get a lot of people killed. And the only thing that we could do at this point, the only weapon at your disposal at this point is staying your ass home. Okay? Stay the home. Don't panic. Don't get anxiety. Just stay home. A little bit more from National Nurses United. I found their conference call very informative and very helpful.
Are contact, droplet, or airborne precautions needed for COVID-19? This was a really big question that nurses submitted for this call. To be clear, both airborne and contact precautions are still needed. This is a new virus. There's lots of information that we still do not have about transmission. There is no evidence to indicate that this virus is only transmitted by droplet. And in fact, there's tons of evidence to indicate that anytime that someone has respiratory symptoms, when someone sneezes, when someone coughs, when someone talks, that creates a wide range of aerosols. Both the big droplets, the respiratory droplets, like when someone sneezes, and sometimes you can see where it goes, and the smaller aerosols that can remain airborne for a period of time. And on top of all of that, there's a new study that was just published on March 10th that found that SARS-CoV-2, this virus that causes COVID-19, can survive in aerosols up to 3 hours, and that this virus can survive on surfaces of different types up to 2 to 3 days. That study indicates that we need to continue to implement airborne and contact precautions.
Okay, that was the voice of Jane Thomason. She is the lead industrial hygienist for National Nurses United. Now, to be sure, their conversation is specific to what nurses need to do to be safe. But the information that they gave is accurate, right? The information they gave is extremely important for you to understand that while this is not considered an airborne virus by the most strictest definition of it, I guess, you could catch it through breathing in. Like at first, yesterday, I think so this is why I'm bringing in more professional resources for people to say it very directly so we can get it clear. Yesterday, we were discussing that you could catch it by somebody sneezing and inhaling some of their droplets from their sneeze. I think that's pretty obvious. But and then yesterday, we also did discuss the fact that it could survive in the air for about 3 hours, meaning someone sneezes and you walk through that motherfucker 3 hours later, it's still there. And then last but not least, the thing that I did not include yesterday is the fact that someone breathing, that there are droplets that come out of people as they breathe. I mean, that might be common sense for everybody, but I don't know if everybody's registered that you could be sitting in a car with somebody and they're just breathing and you can catch it. So what do we do, ladies and gentlemen, non-gender conforming and non-binary individuals? We stay our butts home.
And we also have a chance to be an advocate for Flint again. One of the things I'm pushing for in the relief package is a moratorium on water shutoffs for people who can't pay their bill. You can't wash your hands if you don't have water. And in Flint, Michigan right now, we have the potential of shutoffs in Flint and Detroit and other places. We need to stop that.
That was the voice of Representative Dan Kildee. He represents the Flint, Michigan area, and he's advocating for the same thing that I've been calling for since yesterday, that we all should call for, that we all should reverberate, take the message as your own, use it on your platform, talk to your friends, to tell people who are in influential positions. If you know people who are mayors of cities, everybody spread the word that the only way we survive this is by suspending capitalism. Let's just go for the gold, right? I swear this has to be the most radical revolutionary. I mean, I saw on Twitter, I don't know who did it, but it's not my original thought. So I will at least admit that this is not my original thought. Somebody said on Twitter that Karl Marx had it wrong. He thought it was going to be a proletariat revolution that brought down capitalism. He couldn't foresee that it would be a virus that would bring down capitalism. And this is what's so funny about this. What's so sad and funny about this is that our leaders are really trying to consider what's the threshold. At what point will death become, at what point would it become more valuable for us to shut down this system so everyone can survive versus how many people should we let die to keep the system operating as it is? Really, no, I'm not exaggerating. I am not. If you think I'm being hyperbolic, here's Larry Kudlow. He's an economic advisor to President Trump, and he is the director of the National Economic Council. Take a listen to his reasoning.
We worry about the effect on human beings, for heaven's sake, but I'm just saying, let's not overreact. Yeah. In many ways,
I hear that, Larry,
America
but a lot of
stay at work. We should stay at work.
Health professions that I speak to, Scott Gottlieb, the former FDA commissioner, would say very different things.
So the first voice was Larry Kudlow. And he said, I mean, it went by kind of fast and maybe it didn't have a big impact on you, but he's encouraging from the White House press briefing room, no less, encouraging that everyone stay at work. And he was even talking about people who felt sick. So the people in power are literally trying to consider what is the threshold, because for us to survive this, for us to really bring this to a standstill, for us to flatten the curve and make sure that we minimize the spread so that we don't overwhelm our system, so that the minimum lives will be lost, is by everyone staying home. But by everyone staying home, we crash our economy, right? Not just the stock market. I'm talking about the overall economy. Like, most of us don't even have money in the stock market, right? But I'm talking about your local restaurants, your gas stations, your grocery stores. We can't go out in public like that, like talking about. We have to stay home, and that's going to hurt our economy. The only way we can shore that up is by actually enacting some form of socialism. This is not a boogeyman. This is just real. We need universal basic income so that people can keep consuming from home. Even if it's just using the universal basic income to buy a download, like to buy new music, to buy a video, to buy a movie, to get a streaming service, to make sure that you don't lose your mind over this, I was going to say break, over this quarantine. Like, we have to keep some economic activity going, but we're not going to be able to do it if people can't go to work. And so they're really, and here's the thing, like, you would think that they would know that and enact those policies. But what does this do? What does it do when you realize that AT&T is taking off all their caps for broadband, right? What do you do when you realize that the Fed could just inject $1.5 trillion into the stock market, into the markets? What do you do when people realize, oh, they could suspend evictions? They could just cut off evictions. They can just cut off, they could put a moratorium on foreclosures and repossessions. Oh, the government could just choose to not cut my water off. What does that do? When people realize, oh, the government can just write us a check to keep this economy going. What happens is the people become empowered. The most dangerous thing about this virus, besides the loss of life, besides the crashing of the economy, I would say the third biggest effect of this virus, is the fact that it's waking people up to how much power this government really has over our lives. And no, actually, strike that, how much power we have over this economy. That's the real lesson. I almost said it wrong. It's the power that we have over this economy. And I said it a few weeks ago. I don't know if you remember that episode, but do you recall that episode when I was talking about the fact that we simply have to not participate? If we choose to not participate, we bring this economy to its knees. Go back. I don't know which episode it was, but it was maybe 3 weeks ago, because it was in response to Michael Bloomberg. It was really to incite a general strike where we don't participate in anything. where we don't consume, we don't purchase, and we don't work. We don't give you our labor. We don't give you our consumption. Well, now guess what? Hey, that ended up happening a lot sooner than I thought it would. Here we are. We're not going to be able to consume like we were. I think we have a 75% consumer driven economy, and that's about to flatline. And we're not going to be able to give these people our labor. This is a major economic crisis. On top of the fact that it is a pandemic for which it's going to claim so many, this is a double whammy. And the solution is for us to stay home and for the government to suspend all forms of debt collection, all types of repossessions and foreclosures, evictions, and to institute Medicare for all, as well as a universal basic income so that we can keep a baseline of consumption going. That's it. All right. A couple of more things before we kick it over to the patrons only episode. We are being led by a group of sociopaths. Donald Trump has had an opportunity to show. I've never really understood people who want to be great until it's time to be great. Why man wanna be great? Yeah. You actually had an opportunity to go down in history, Donald Trump, as the man who saved millions of lives as the president. This would have been your guaranteed ticket to a second term. Hell, I would have voted for you if you got this right, because this is a critical moment. I'm joking. I would never vote for Donald Trump, but still, I would have hinted at it. I would have pretended like I was going to vote for him. That counts for something, right? But we're at a juncture where his decision making could have saved hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives. And what does he do instead? What does he do? A couple of things that they did. The Trump administration will move ahead with its plans. This is according to BuzzFeed News. The Trump administration is going to move ahead with their plans to kick people off of food stamps despite the coronavirus outbreak. So not only are people not going to be able to work, but they're not going to get food stamps because that's just what this administration likes to do. In addition, according to the Los Angeles Times, the Trump administration blocks states from using Medicaid to respond to the coronavirus. In other words, if you're poor, fuck you. All right, that's just the beginning. Then this morning, Donald Trump went to Twitter, and what does he do? He attacks the CDC. He says, as quote, "For decades, the CDC looked at and studied its testing system, but did nothing about it. It would have always been inadequate and slow for a large-scale pandemic, but a pandemic would never happen, they hoped. President Obama made changes only that complicated things further. Their response to H1N1 swine flu was a full-scale disaster." Huh? The outbreak that didn't break out? Anyway, he said, with thousands dying and nothing meaningful done to fix the testing problem until now. The changes have been made and the testing will soon happen on a very large scale basis. All red tape has been cut, ready to go. This is utter bullshit. This is actually not what happened. Yeah, I think a few thousand people did die from the H1N1, but it was contained. You fatuous moron. You petulant man-child. You tiny-fingered little miscreant. It was contained, and because of the actions that Obama took. Listen, I've got more criticisms of the Obama administration than the average black man. Okay. But one thing they did do was they managed that crisis well. And everything that Donald Trump is doing at this point is going to cause more people to die, including the fact that they cut the budget to the CDC. In addition to cutting the budget to the CDC, in 2018, Donald Trump fired the entire epidemic response team. This from Snopes.com. I like to get fact checks. So here's a fact check from Snopes.com. Rear Admiral Timothy Zimmer abruptly departed his post leading the Global Health Security Team on the National Security Council in May of 2018 amid a reorganization of the council by then National Security Advisor John Bolton, and Zimmer's team was disbanded. Tom Bossert, whom the Washington Post reported had called for a comprehensive biodefense strategy against pandemics and biological attacks, had been fired 1 month prior. It's true that the Trump administration axed the executive branch's team responsible for coordinating a response to a pandemic and did not replace it, eliminating Zimmer's position and reassigning others. Although Bolton was the executive at the top of the National Security Council chain of command at the time, it still falls at the feet of Donald Trump. So they fired the team that would have coordinated this and did not replace it. it gets worse. We're led. I mean, not only are they sociopathic in terms of the cruelty being the point, but we're also dealing with the fact that, according to Politico.com, that it was the quote, the Trump administration's decision to forego a World Health Organization test and create its own that had faithful consequences, according to the experts. So the Trump administration rejected the original test from the World Health Organization to detect coronavirus all the way back in January, while they tried to create their own here in the United States, but to no success. So they knew about this test. They knew about this virus long enough ago for us to have gotten a test from the World Health Organization, which would, I mean, look at every other nation. 60 other nations are currently using the WHO, the World Health Organization's test, but we don't have our own. We're still testing like 2,000 people total, when South Korea has tested 200,000 people. And I believe we have almost 10 times as many people in our population. All right. My closing music is coming up. We have a lot more to cover. This is as good a time as any for you to go ahead and go to patreon.com/the BPD show and becoming a patron so you can get the rest of today's show. I don't even think I've played half the clips that I have to play, half the commentary that I have got. You're going to get twice the content without any of the advertisements. If you don't go over there and I don't see you over there, then I will see you Monday. Patrons, stay tuned. More to come after this.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/the BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.